They said he was too aggressive, too outspoken, too ambitious for an industry that didn't want to change. But today's guest didn't play by the old rules. Gary Mauris saw that the system was dominated by banks and outdated brokerages, so he decided to take them on. He started with nothing but conviction and a handful of brokers who believed that Canadians deserved choice. The industry pushed back, competitors dismissed him, yet year after year, Dominion Lending Centers grew. Today, it's the largest broker network in Canada, built on persistence, vision, thick skin, and a belief that doing things differently could actually change lives. In this episode, Gary opens up about the sacrifices it took to scale a national brand, the criticism that fueled him, and the mindset behind building an empire in an industry that once tried to shut him out. This is a conversation about leadership, resilience, and what it really takes to win when no one is cheering you on. It's packed full of actionable advice that can immediately elevate any broker's business. Well, Gary, you have a pretty incredible story. I've only ever got to hear a piece of it in terms of what your journey's been like from, entrepreneur running many different businesses now into the largest mortgage business with Dominion Lending Centers across Canada. I'd love to kind of hear how your journey started and what brought you into the mortgage industry in the first place.
It was interesting. I was always for sort of an entrepreneur kid. I always was that kid that would go out and had, multiple jobs. And, I was always curious and always interested. And short version of how I ended up in the mortgage space is I had built two companies that I had developed sort of Canada-wide and I had sold off. And in 2004, I was in my early 30s. Okay. I had bought a house down in Palm Springs, California. I had kind of, been raised, as a kid, we'd go down and we'd drive down in our Datsun 510 down to Palm Springs. And I kind of fell in love with that. And, was taking my kids down there and had bought in a place down there. And, life is interesting, right? Life always, is rapidly changing. You never know where the next opportunity is going to come from.
Sure.
Anyway, my neighbor down in Palm Springs was a loan officer for WAMU, Washington Mutual, which actually went out of business in the credit crisis. But at that time, we were having a beer one afternoon, and it was a Thursday afternoon, about 4:30. It was a beautiful sunny day. And I was asking him about his business as a loan officer. And he said something that really sort of tweaked an interest in me, right? Almost 75% of all loans in the US were done through a mortgage broker. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really high because, I know in the US, there's what seems like hundreds of lenders in every, state. Sure. So I thought, well, how do loan officers get that kind of market penetration? Anyway, we finished that afternoon, and that night I was thinking about it, and I knew one guy in the mortgage business, and it's my business partner today, a guy by the name of Chris K. Chris?
Yes.
He was a Royal LePage owner, had 3 different locations with Royal LePage, and he had become a mortgage broker to really capture sort of some of the business inside of his real estate office.
Sure.
So I called Chris, and I said, Chris, tell me about the mortgage industry. And I had followed Chris a little bit, and I knew he was doing fairly well in it. I knew he liked the actual business. And, I said, Chris, whatever happens in the US normally happens in Canada. So whether it's manufacturing or fashion or fabric or music or trends or hobbies, right? They usually start in bigger markets and then eventually transfer into, smaller markets. So I said, that's interesting. Anyway, the next day, after sleeping on it that night, I called Chris and I just said, how's it going? How many people use a broker? What do you think about the business going forward? And I said to him, I think there might be an opportunity.
Sure.
So when I come back to Canada, let's get together. I'll pick your brain. We'll make some inquiries and we'll investigate sort of the Canadian finance space. So there we did. Came back, started making some calls, reaching out, talking to brokers, attended a conference. Back then it was CAMP.
Yes.
Which is MPC today.
Right.
And started at one side of the conference, went every single booth and just asked questions.
Okay. So did all the research into the industry first. And what really propelled you to want to passionately get into the mortgage industry?
Well, I was a young guy and I was looking for something else to do. And I saw Chris as a broker. I saw he was doing quite well as a broker.
Okay.
And really, I just thought there was an opportunity. I thought there was a missing piece in Canada. As we all know today, most Canadians grew up with their checkbook, from one of the major banks and would walk in and see the teller. And, there was kind of the big, 6 in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I just, instantly was able to sort of deduct that more choice equals more savings, right? More choice equals more value for the consumer.
Sure.
And because so many people in the US had already proven that they saw value in working with a mortgage professional, I, was certain that would translate into Canada.
Cool.
And there was brokers around in 2006 when we started, of course,
Right.
but we really were the epitome of the broker of last resort,
Yes.
right? That's everyone just thought you would only use a broker if you had challenged or poor or blemished credit.
Right.
And I just thought that it could be so much more.
So when you and Chris started DLC, what were the two key non-negotiables for DLC that you implemented as you started the business that would guarantee your success moving forward from what you'd learned kind of previously as an entrepreneur and you wanted to bring to this industry based on all the research that you just completed?
Yeah, so I don't think we ever thought anything was going to be, a magic bullet or anything would guarantee our success. I knew it was going to be just disgustingly hard.
Okay.
I knew there was going to be, a lot of people sort of fighting against, any success or any growth. But there is a couple things that I said early on. Number one, building something that's good enough is not good enough, right? Like we have to constantly be focused on iterating and improving and building something that is going to be the very best in the industry. And the other thing that I said to all those team members in those early days is I never want to hear this is the way we used to do it. I don't care that this is the way that it's always been done.
Yep.
There's nobody in the industry at that time that I was so blown away by that I cared to, emulate. I thought, I want to build something. I want to build a national recognizable brand. I want to bring tools and technology. I want to bring credibility and trust to the end user, the consumer. And we have to be ridiculously focused on the quality of what we build, the quality of the tech, the quality of our relationships. So, really for us, it was just a tenacity, right? Of we're going to build something really great and we're never going to settle for something that is good enough.
I think one of the key things when you look at it in business, there are a lot of people that get to certain levels where they go, it is good enough. And I think that you've seen that in our industry as an opportunity across some of the other brokerages where they just got to a place where it was good enough and they kind of settled and then you continue to propel beyond that. I think we've seen that specifically in the last 10 years here with DLC, just in terms of the growth that is there. When did you guys, yourself and Chris, really recognize that Dominion Lending Centers could be a national brand and the size that it's grown to today?
So number one, you are most vulnerable, right, when you're most successful because you stop doing the very things that actually got you to that level where you can say, we're doing okay, or I feel like we're starting to win a little bit, or we're getting ahead. And I see often that as soon as people start, getting to that level, they start to pull off. They aren't as tenacious. They don't grind. The hustle slows down a little bit. They make a few less phone calls. They don't attend the amount of events that they maybe had once attended. And it really becomes death by 1,000 paper cuts. To answer your question, when did we finally think that we could build a national brand? I think we, thought it early on, right? Like my thing was always think bigger, right? I only have so many hours in the day. Be incredibly focused on how I spend those hours. I think probably after the global credit crisis. So we launched the company in January of 2006. It's going to be 20 years old next month. And just, inside of kind of 13, 14 months, we were smack dab in the middle of the global credit crisis. 15 lenders that we were working with in Canada pulled out of the Canadian market. There was panic in the streets. Everyone was uncertain of what the market was, going to look like going forward. There was a lot of lenders that, weren't certain that they were even going to survive, beyond, another sort of 6 to 12 months. But when we got through and got a year behind us after the global credit crisis, and we realized that the worst was behind us, I think we really, sort of thought to ourselves, if we do this right, if we are relentlessly focused on doing the hard work forever without ever, giving up, I think we could have a tiger by the tail.
So when you guys started building DLC and your reputation kind of presumes you. And when we take a look at who you are as an individual, you're very polarized in terms of the way that people view you. And I, especially back then, as you and Chris kind of came onto the scene,
Sure.
before I had met you, I had heard tons of stories about you. Gary's a villain, and I was like, oh, I don't know about this guy, etc. And from the moment I sat down with you, I knew what a genuine individual you were and how you cared about people. And ultimately, that's what brought us to Dominion Lending Centers with our company. But I'd love to hear kind of what that was like for you guys as you stepped onto the scene in the mortgage space. You started to build Dominion Lending Centers, and you had all these people kind of calling you out as a villain, and how you overcome that and how it potentially fueled you to continue on.
Yeah, great question. So, number one, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to have a really thick skin.
Sure.
I often say to people, it feels like I've been kicked in the face so many times. I got a permanent taste of leather in my mouth, right? Like, it has not been easy. It is never easy. We're 20 years in. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Because you got to understand that when you're growing, somebody else is shrinking.
Yeah.
Our model was to build, a more promising, a more visual brand. It was to redefine the technology. It was to help agents and owners build their business. We always viewed it that when I brought somebody over, their life had to be better. They had to make more money. They had to become more efficient. So we weren't taking brand new brokers who had just finished the education component and turning them into mortgage brokers. We picked up the phone and we were calling those top producers that were at our competitors.
Right.
And I think because of that, we've made the entire industry much better. But was I a villain? Oh, yeah, you betcha. I always said to people in the very darkest days as we went through it, because everyone was gunning for us in those, first 10, 12 years.
Right.
Right. I always said, those who know us know better. Because here's what I knew. I knew our lenders loved us. Yep. I knew our partners. I knew our suppliers. I knew our agents, and I knew our owners. Right. We're all fans and really, understood what we stood for. Mm-hmm. But I also understood that if you're a competitor and, one of your top brokers or top teams had come over to us, I knew it was going to sting.
Sure.
And, there's the old saying, right? It's lonely at the top, right? It's because when you're growing at a faster pace than everybody else, unfortunately, many people, rather than build a better mousetrap and compete and just focus on how they spend their time and bringing more value,
right,
to their team, they unfortunately, backtrack to the point where they want to create rumor and innuendo, and they think that discounting somebody else's model is going to bring more value to theirs. And it doesn't, right? Because over a long period of time, people really understand that history speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. And if you've done it now, it's much easier today. We're 20 years in, we're leading the industry. We're growing faster than ever before. It's fun.
Yeah.
Right. Because, a lot of those, those hard days, those villainous days are largely behind us because it's really hard to dispute results.
Of course.
But don't think for 1 second that I don't take competition ever, right? Seriously. Yeah. I take it as serious as brain cancer.
Yeah.
And it's our job to always make sure that we iterate, that we're looking for new opportunities, that we are finding ways to bring more value to the broker community in Canada. I don't take Pilot, your organization, or anyone who, shares our banner with us like it's owed to me, right? I'll tell you, and I told you this before, and I'll make it really clear, right? I work for you, right? You don't work for me. My job is to make your job easier, to make you more efficient, to make you more profitable, to help you grow. And I think that the minute that you think that, you did it, I think you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Right. I always say to people, when everything is going right, give all the praise away. And when everything is going wrong, when shit is hitting the fan, it's my fault.
I've heard you talk about that in regards to how you run your team at Dominion Lending Centers, and I've seen you, personally own things that have gone wrong with DLC. So you actually live kind of what you preach, which is rare to see these days from individuals. So yeah, Gary, I appreciate that. And one of the key pieces that you just highlighted is that you work for me, and I don't work for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you took that philosophy and applied it to the growth of DLC and the relationships that you've built with all the owners of brokerages across Dominion Lending Centers? Because I know that when we come to the events, the owners events, et cetera, everybody has an incredible time. We love the people that are at DLC.
Right.
So if you could tell us a little bit more about that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think you've heard this expression, or you've read this in books, but, maybe the best word for it is servant leadership. All it means is that your job, your life, your world has to get better by being part of ours. And I say to my entire team that it is not enough to talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. That means that we go the extra mile. I've often said to people, if somebody asks you to do 8 hours of work, do 9 or 10. For you guys, there is nothing in our industry that we won't help with. You come to me and, you want to make an acquisition. You want us to help finance that acquisition. I've done it many times across Canada. You want my legal team to get you out of some sort of, quagmire, or maybe you have a partnership dispute. I've solved partnership disputes and I've given people advice on both sides. You want to help us build your team. We have a recruiting team that will help you grow and, add qualified professional brokers to your team. You're going through a rough patch in business where you can't, keep yourself as motivated as you once were. We're available. I can't explain it any more than, our guys understand that we don't exist without our agents and our owners. And, we never take that for granted, right? I mean, I just said to you on the way out here, I drove 90 minutes in the rain and rush hour traffic, because you asked me to do a podcast. I owe that to you, right? You do a great job, representing our organization. If there's anything that we can do to help you build your business, we're going to try to do it. And I think that really starts, at the top.
Yeah.
It's really important as a leader that you have to be able to lead by example. Mm-hmm. It's funny, managers often walk around and they try to find people doing things wrong. They try to correct them. A leader walks around and finds people doing things right, praising them, right? Letting them know how well they're doing. There's a big difference.
Fair. I think you see that across organizations as well. But when you look at the broker industry today, obviously Dominion Lending Center has now become the largest. And when you look at kind of the gaps in other brokerages or other spaces in the industry that we're trying to fill, and that is still driving new brokers to come to DLC today, what do you find is the number one thing that people feel like they're lacking when we go from, their existing brokerage to Dominion Lending Centers, or have voiced as concerns?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things. People make the transition for different reasons. I think really size matters, right? I think, scalability and leveraging the brand matters. I think that agents are really starting to understand that they get to go, listen, I'm an expert. I've been in the business a long time. I'm with Pilot Mortgage. But I wanted you, the customer, to know that we're actually part of the DLCG group of companies.
Sure.
And collectively, we originate more mortgage loans in Canada than any other Canadian bank, trust company, or credit union. We're a publicly traded company. We trade under the stock symbol DLCG, because that kind of stuff matters to consumers. Sure. Here's what a consumer wants. A consumer doesn't want to make a mistake. They don't want to pay too much. So, having the ability to leverage that brand, I would never say to you, right, or any of our office owners or any of our brokers, don't use your personal brand. Don't use the Pilot brand. Be proud of that. You built that up. It's very important. Right? But make sure that you take an advantage and use all the advertising, whether it's on your email signatures, whether it's on your business cards, your exterior signage, your billboards, whatever you do in terms of, building your brand, and make sure that you actually put it side by side with the national brand, with the DLCG group of companies, because together you become a very powerful 1-2 punch. So that's number one, leveraging the brand.
Right.
Number two, brokers want to be as efficient as possible. They want to, do a very, very good job, but they need the tools in order to be able to create and build something that's sustainable, so they can create enterprise value in all of the past customers and business that they've already done.
Sure.
So if you look at our company, it's interesting because, you're on it. Everyone's on it now. 95% of our entire volume is now on Velocity.
Right.
Velocity at one time was, very difficult to get people to change habits and make the switch from the incumbent software system that they'd been on for 15 or 20 years.
Of course, yeah.
Now it's our number one selling feature.
Yeah.
So now people are joining it because their business just got easier. It's the gold standard in the industry, right? So now all of a sudden they look at it and they go, okay, right? I'll give you an example. We're early adopters, AI, right? We have AI already integrated in Velocity. It's not coming. We're not working on it. You literally, on every single transaction, can use AI to write all of your lender notes, all of your broker notes. You can search your database. You can write emails to the client. It just does a host of activities already. We were the first to market to handle the AML solutions, right? Which are really important because keeping your license and making sure that you're on top of it and providing that security for these agents is really important. And the last thing that I would put into that bucket, right, with technology as the number 2 reason why brokers, would look to join a group like ours or like Pilot, is the gold rush, right?
Sure.
I mean, we recognized that there was a problem. Busy brokers were very good face-to-face. They were really knowledgeable and experts in their field, but not many of them were really good running a proper CRM.
Yeah.
And there is a battle. It is a ugly, bloody battle today to get people's attention. So, if you don't have a CRM or you have a CRM that is touching your customers 6, 8, 10 times a year, it is not enough. We solve that, right? For the industry. We said, come to us. We will import all of your information. We'll clean up your list for you. And then we will speak to your customers in multiple ways, 31 times per year, without you even pushing a button. And there's even a debate now whether 31 times a year, right, is enough because of how hard it is. Yeah. I just came, I'm part of a group called the Dirty Dozen Group, named after a World War II regiment. But it's myself, Darren Hardy, and 9 other, CEOs from around North America. And we just talked about it at our last retreat in Rhode Island a couple of weeks ago, right? Like, if you want to do a better job, build your business, earn more money, send more emails more often. Out of 4 people, 1 out of 4 will say you're communicating too much to me. Yep. But 3 out of 4 you'll resonate with, right? And I'll take a 75% success ratio anytime because there is so much difficulty getting through to people right now. They're not reading email. So you have to communicate via email, via SMS, via social media, via snail mail. It's coming back and is in vogue.
Sure.
You have to really do the work to get, through to people today. And we just, our technology solved a lot of that work.
I think, Gary, when you take a look at your ability to get in front of your customer today, there's so many different ways that you can do that. Social media, YouTube, snail mail coming back just because nobody gets mail anymore these days. Everything's digital statements, et cetera. So when you look at brokers, and one of the key things that you highlighted there, from a technology perspective and kind of solving issues for mortgage brokers today, one of the things that we see as issues with mortgage brokers is they just don't even have the information, So how many times do I need to be in contact with my clients? How can I get in front of them? How do I set up a CRM system? Do you think that there is a lack of training available for mortgage professionals today in terms of how they run a successful mortgage brokerage business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the training's out there. I think you just got to go and they got to find it, right? I think we do a much better job than a lot of people do. Right. Even in a company like ours, there's really proactive, sort of owners, people like, yourself and others that do a better job than others. But here's the most important thing. 99.8% or some obscure, very high number of all information in the world is available online at our fingertips right now.
It is.
With AI, you can get anything you want. So, people often say to me, what is the difference between a successful broker and a struggling broker? And it's just habits. And it's just use of time. If you use your spare time and you're using AI, you're using Google, and you're searching that information, right? You can find everything you need, right? If you invest in yourself, which will always be your number one investment, you will fast track. You will be so far ahead of all of your competitors. So, can we do a better job as an industry? Sure. But the challenge isn't with the information being available. The challenge is connecting with the people that need the information because of that ugly, bloody battle to get their attention today. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be a percentage of people, the top 20 or 25%, 20%, the Pareto principle, where they just got it. They just know it. They self-motivate. They're hustlers, right? They have that fire and that passion, and they're going to do exceedingly well because of it. But for that next level, that next tranche, you as a leader or me as a leader, getting in front of people as often as possible and letting them know what is available and actually holding their hands and really just helping them get started can have a profound impact in their business.
When you look at the top 1% of mortgage brokers with Dominion Lending Centers, what do you see as the difference between those individuals and the rest of the market space? In terms of, you talked a little bit about it just there in terms of their persistence and how detailed they are and their willingness to go learn and apply that and invest in themselves. But, what else do you see really that separates that top 1%? Because I remember, the days before we got to $100 million in terms of volume, I used to think that there was some magic trick that they had, something that I just didn't know, some introduction that I needed or that one post on social media or something that would lead me there.
Or technology, everyone goes, I must need better tech.
Yes.
You don't need better tech, you need better habits.
Yeah. So what habits do you see out of the top 1%?
Well, number one, top 1%, right, are very laser focused. They're not trying to be all things to all people. I was speaking to a guy the other day that, has been in the business a long time.
Yeah.
But, he's got an investment in a wealth management team and he's involved in real estate. He's doing mortgages and he's just got all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anyone excel being top of their game unless they're absolute laser focused. So if I look at the very top performers in the country, and we have more top performers than anybody else by a staggering, amount, it is that hustle, right? They just got that, that desire. They just, I don't know if it's innate or maybe some of them learned it, but they just get up and they're fired up. And, number two, they're very good with their time. They spend their time focused on the tasks that are going to produce the highest results. I often say to people, don't be a high value person and do low value tasks.
Sure.
So what is a high value task? What are these top performers doing it? Well, they're on top of their database. They make it a priority. They're making outbound calls. They're spending time with their referral sources. They're learning how to become a better leader. They're great communicators. They're not doing data entry. They aren't, doing all the little niggly things that, an office needs to have done.
Yeah.
Right. I always say to people, if you don't have an assistant and you're a top producing mortgage broker, you are an assistant.
Right.
Right. And, I think helping people get very clear on sort of the best use of their time. And that's what top producers do, and they just don't get distracted, right? They really understand that the best thing they could be doing is talking to customers, talking to clients, talking to referral sources about their expertise. And that's, bringing value, saving money, and giving more choice to their consumers.
I love that. Let's pivot a little bit and just talk about kind of mortgage industry as a whole today.
Sure.
Obviously been a wild last kind of 5 years through COVID. We had wild real estate in Canada through 2021, record low interest rates, and then have now come out of that, has had high inflation, high interest rates. When we take a look at kind of the broker space today and the banking space, what do you really see as the future of the broker industry over, the next 5 years to, 2030 as brokers continue to maybe grab more market share with AI coming in, technology, everything else that's in there? Where do you see this industry going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I'm extraordinarily optimistic. I'm still the single largest shareholder in DLCG group of companies. We're a publicly traded company, as you know. So, that's significant. And I'm looking for ways to get, more involved in the business because I think our next 5 years are going to be our best 5 years. A couple of reasons being, consumers are really understanding now, for maybe the first time ever in the last few years, the value of working with a mortgage professional, right? The other thing is that the last generation of the baby boomers is just aging out now.
Right.
So all those people that, traditionally just went to their bank, right? And intuitively, and thought that their bank would give them the best product or the best pricing, they're out now, right?
Sure.
They paid off their mortgages, they're retiring. So the next generation, the next two generations coming up, are much more in tune with actually shopping and using online tools to, make sure they're getting proper choice and proper advice. So I think that we're in a very good space.
What way do you see that being critical moving forward for Canadian consumers? In what way?
Well, I mean, I think really, we're seeing more banks come into our space. So, as last year we just had BMO come into our space. That's a huge validation for our space. I absolutely believe that you'll see the other two major banks in Canada that aren't in our space in the next 4 to 5 years, because they have to go to where the consumer is going right now, right? The Canadian consumer right now, is at an age now where baby boomers have largely aged out. So that whole cycle is gone. They were the group that traditionally went to their bank, right? Without even thinking about working with a broker. The next two generations are much more comfortable with searching online, right? And shopping for, the best option and the best pricing. So if I look at our space, it's interesting because I think that the next 5 years are going to be extraordinarily good for us as a business. And I'll give you the best comparison that I can. I talk to the other CEOs in other countries from all over the world, right? We're always trying to figure out what's going on. And two markets specifically that really stand out, and that's the UK and that's Australia. Inside of the last 90 days, I've had conversations with both the CEOs of the largest company in the UK and the largest company in Australia. And they're between 60 and 85% of all mortgages done in those two markets are done via working with a mortgage professional. 10 years ago, they were around the same percentage as we are, somewhere around 45%. So what they've said is that, the deeper into their journey they got, the more consumers adapted, really understood the value of working with a mortgage professional. Sure. And the savings that we can actually bring to them and the certainty around, pricing and product. And it has just continued to increase year after year. We expect to see the exact same thing in Canada.
It's interesting because as you look at kind of the discussion of the baby boomers always went to the bank because they knew Bob at the bank. They had a relationship with Bob, and what we've kind of seen in our industry, I would say over the last 5 years, there's obviously all the online tools. You can shop online for interest rates. But what we are finding on the ground, with the clients that we're dealing with is it's really coming back to that relationship piece because people need somebody to actually guide them through the process and explain what it means. And so, you've seen all the things online as far as AI and that, mortgage brokers won't exist. You'll just be able, I just don't ever believe that will be the case because when you bring it all back to that relationship at the end of the day and actually caring about the human beings that you are working with and the dreams and goals that you're helping them achieve, I can totally see how that would loop into as more people started to understand the value of a mortgage professional and their investment as human beings and you as a client, how that would continue to grow for us here in Canada.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting, this whole talk about, online brokerages and the eradication of mortgage professionals. In Canada, we are very conservative by nature, right? I'm going to use all technology at my fingertips in order to shop, in order to educate, in order to learn about products, to choose the broker or the company that I want to work with. But at the end of the day, I still want to be able to phone, speak to someone, maybe go and visit that person, because, it's a very complex, experience. It isn't generic. It isn't off the shelf. Every single mortgage is a little bit different, can be tailored a little bit different for each individual family member, depending on where they are in their journey and what they need. So, I've been fighting that battle for 20 years since we, got into the business where people said, oh, everything's going to be online. And I'm like you, Ty, I just don't believe it. I believe that, working with a professional to get advice, someone that I have a relationship on that, I can talk about my specific individual needs, my concerns, things that I don't understand, I think are very important. And, as I said, I believe that our next 5 years are going to be our best 5 years because of those factors.
Gary, when we take a look at the mortgage industry, obviously you have the top 1% that are doing majority of the volume, but you also have all these other people that are just trying to break through and kind of make a name for themselves and get to a place where they can be successful as well. What do you think are the key things holding those individuals back from getting to that next level, making a name for themselves and building some kind of legacy inside of the Canadian mortgage space?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's funny because, we look at our numbers in general. We have more than 9,000 agents out there and, about 70% of our volume is done by 30% of our agents, right? So it really, the top agents are doing much more than the rest, obviously. What I find with mortgage professionals maybe that are in those early stages is they're just not really clear on what they should be doing and where they should be spending their time. Right? You don't have to obviously learn all the products from all the different lenders, right? Like literally, you have to know your top 3 or 4 lenders. You have to understand their basic product, number one. Number two is that you have to start with a large group of people that you can start to educate on the value of working with you or the value of working with you and the DLCG group of companies. So what do? Well, you begin building a database. What does a database look like? Well, a database early on, because you're a brand new mortgage professional, could just be anyone you've worked with in the past. So friends, family, neighbors, uncles, cousins. It could be anybody on the sports field, that you're going to see when your son or daughter's playing soccer on a Sunday. Now with social media, they have these great tools where you can search, people that you knew from where you used to work and, different organizations.
Sure.
So number one is building a database of people that, that recognize you by first and last name, that have had an experience with you. And then leveraging the actual company, leveraging the brand, explaining early on, communicating to these people, right? Of, what you do as a mortgage professional, the fact that you work with Canada's national mortgage company, although you're new to the industry, your team is not, right?
Right.
We do $80 billion a year of mortgage financing. And, I think just really making sure that you have the ability to leverage the brand, that you are building a database, that you are reaching out on a regular basis. Then you have to be everywhere. You have to be at every single event. You have to educate yourself. You have to hang out with top performers because some of those habits and attributes are going to rub off on you. You're going to see what other people are doing. And then, leverage the message, right? And, have to let everyone know exactly what you do, exactly why you chose this career. So, that's outbound phone calls. It is a sales organization. It is a sales job. You have to be, comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? You have to make those outbound phone calls. You have to send those social media, messages. You have to send those SMS. You have to make those, those snail mail mail outs. And you just got to get in front of a lot of people. It really is a numbers game. And, as you start doing some business, you get more comfortable. But in the early days, as a new mortgage professional, you have to generate people to talk to. You have to generate leads. And there's a whole program that we have. It's a program that I wrote years ago that we've used that, gives you a step-by-step action plan on what you have to do when you get started as a mortgage professional.
Right.
And it's not easy. If you get through the first 2 years in our business, you'll probably get through and be very successful.
Do you think people get stuck sometimes not wanting to do the hard work that is actually tied to this industry in terms of making those phone calls, doing all the reach outs,
Yeah, they're terrified. I mean, people often say that I'm terrified. They're making a phone call and they're going, please don't hang up. Please don't answer. Please don't answer. Please don't answer. Please don't answer. Right. But, realistically, it's just about educating your circle of influence, right? Making a master, a large list of as many. I've coached many people over the years. And the first thing I've said is in the next 14 days, bring me back a name of 1,000 people on social media. And they go, 1,000 people on social media. That seems like a lot. It is a lot. Right. But you literally can do it with all of your friends, and you can do it over a 2 or 3 week period. And then what we do is we start dripping on those people, right? We start sending them messages. We start doing mail outs to them. We start doing videos to them because all we're trying to do is become top of mind. Mm-hmm. And as you become top of mind, and the other thing is early on, when you're new, you're going to leverage the team because there is people who will be uncomfortable working with you because they see you as a brand new mortgage professional. Of
course.
But that's when you leverage the brand. You go, I'm part of Dominion Lending Centers. I'm on one of the top mortgage teams in the country. Listen, I'm going to be involved in the transaction, but I have an entire team behind me that's going to help make sure that we choose the right product and get you the very best pricing available to you. It really is sort of, that elementary, right? It's make a big list, figure out the touch points, how you're going to, make those touch points, whether it's, as we said earlier, SMS, email marketing, text message, social media, outbound telephone calling. And sooner or later, if you practice those habits consistently, you will just start closing deals. And, the longer you do it, the more success starts to show up, the more frequently it shows up. And, before long, you're hiring an assistant, you're building a team. But yeah, it's, I think people have to be clear that this is a sales organization. Yeah. This is a sales job, right? And, the first year is going to be a grind. But if you, have the good habits and, do the things that we're speaking of, you will find a way to be very successful in this business long term.
Out of all of that, Gary, new agent, obviously database, super key. How important is coaching and mentorship?
Unbelievably important. Number one thing you should be doing is being everywhere, talking to everyone. If there is a opportunity to get coaching, right, you should absolutely do it. If you can, matter of fact, when you're looking at joining a team as a new mortgage professional, or if you're a current mortgage professional and you're on a team right now and you're struggling, you need to start looking at another team. You need to find a home that's going to have someone help you get through that first 12 months of business, right? Like where they absolutely are invested in your future. Don't worry about splits. It has to be competitive. You don't need the highest split. What you need to actually be with somebody who is going to help you get over the hump. I'm an avid reader, right? Like I always say to everyone, the most important thing in my life for me is to always have a beginner's mindset. The day you stop learning is the day you start dying. So, that's all you're looking for. If you're not knocking it out of the park right now as a mortgage professional. If you're doing less than $10 million annually, it's time for you to get a coach or get a mentor. It'll have a profound impact in your business. Then when you get to that next level, when you're at 25 million or 30 million, it's time for you to get an assistant. And we're going to help you with, what you should have that assistant be doing. But I can't, impart strongly enough picking that right team and making sure that they're available and you have someone on there and they have coaching and they have mentoring, and they have, at least a sales meeting or a daily huddle, and they have an environment where you feel welcome to pick up the phone, right? To call them, to email them, to ask questions. Go to a busy company that has a lot going on to really accelerate your success in this business.
How many brokerages today do you think lack that mentorship or coaching for their agents?
I think still a lot. Honestly, I'm biased. I think that DLC has got the highest quality agents in the country. Our numbers speak for themselves. I think that we have a lot of really good owners that are really dialed in and are really into personal development.
Right.
And are doing a lot of events, a lot of education. But I think that there's a pile out there. I think there's a lot of small organizations, small groups that, just simply think that they can sign you up, allow you to get licensed under their banner and think that that's enough. Or they think that you work for them. They actually work for you. And their job as a good leader, as a good franchise owner, as a good team that you maybe want to join is to help you get better. If you don't get better, if you don't grow your business, if they don't help you with your focus and your tasks, you're on the wrong team, right? Like literally what you're looking for is somebody that's been through it before, that's gone through the journey that you're going through right now, that's had the struggles and is feeling the frustration that you're feeling today. And they go, I got you. I've been there. I want you to do this, 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 and this. I want you to make 10 outbound calls every single day.
Yep.
I want you to call 5 realtors every single week. I want you to make sure you're signed up for Gold Rush and all of your past friends, family, neighbors, uncles, cousins are getting dripped on 31 times per year. I want you to be on this Zoom every Friday for 90 minutes, right? It's not an opt-in, right? Like we're going to help you go to the next level in your business. But here are the ABCs of how you become successful in your business. And I need you to show up and do the work.
Yeah.
Right? When you're leading someone like that and that emphatically, like people say in our business, the best thing about our business is that you're in control of your own calendar. It's actually the worst thing in our business.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean? Especially as a new mortgage professional.
Yes.
Right? Your time is your most valuable asset. You have to use your time wisely. Right? And if you're struggling to generate business, you have to be generating, business activities. And that's all the things that you and I talked about. And you have to be part of a team that makes it mandatory and manages, your inputs every single week.
I think the clarity there is what a lot of brokers are missing. What exactly do I have to do every single day? I don't think it's clearly out there.
One of the things that I want to talk about today was social media.
Yeah.
People get so wrapped up in social media and what should I do and how often should I post and, does it have to be professional? I found the most powerful thing with social media is, way more important than posting. Get as many people on social media as you possibly can and spend an hour every single day and comment on what's going on in their life. Because I have 5,000 people on social media. Do I stay in touch with all 5,000? No. But I look for ways to create unexpected emotional connections. I find something when, one of my contacts on social media has had a life event. They've had a new grandchild. They've had a graduation. They've just got a new job. They've had a death in the family. I find that I can send a very personal, heartfelt message, maybe followed up with a small gift. And they go, wow, I never expected that. And I find that the more that I reach out on social media, and not likes are for losers,
yes,
right? Actual meaningful comments, 10 to 20 words, the more engagement I find from my social media feeds. All of a sudden, I start getting inbound messages. Hey, Gary, my mortgage is coming due, next year. Should I be talking about you? What do you think rates are going to do? Are you too busy for me? Do you have a minute? Can I chat with you?
Of course.
And, that's where I find social media can be really valuable, right? It's not what I post. It's the comments that I'm making on other people's posts so that they feel like we now have a connection and they're more comfortable reaching out to me and engaging me when they have mortgage finance questions.
I love that. You've been saying that for years. I remember you sharing that with us. I mean, we have our director of WOW now that, is helping us do that. And I think it's funny because as we've watched social media, it started out with, Facebook way back in the day. And the thing that everybody loved about Facebook is you could see what everybody was up to and comment on their things, and it kept you connected. And as we've gotten further into social media, it's less of that and it's more of promotion and everything else. But what you keep drawing it back to here is that relationship and that connection that you actually build with the people in your lives and your clients.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are really are absolutely fearful of social media, right? Especially that sort of my age and even maybe 10 or 15 years before me, they just are very uncomfortable with it. And all I would say to you is just start. Right. Make sure that you're on all the major platforms. Make sure that you friend as many people as possible. Certainly you can do your post, a couple of days a week of something interesting or what the Bank of Canada is doing or an interesting article or something. But way more important is being consistent every single day and finding ways to make meaningful contributions, meaningful posts on somebody else's posts. Because all you're trying to do is you're trying to, have them think in their mind, I like this person. He seems to care. That was a meaningful comment that resonated with me. So that they feel comfortable in reaching out to you when they can actually use your service. Super, super simple. The other thing that we talked about was that director of WOW. And the concept of the director of WOW is if you're a professional mortgage broker and you've been in the business for a while and you have a database, the best thing that you can do is be making outbound calls to that database. And how do you do it? Well, you start with the oldest person in that database and you start making calls. And if you're a broker doing 10 or 15 or $20 million a year, you can make those outbound calls yourself.
Of course.
But if you're a broker that has been in the business and is doing 25 or 30 or 40, you need to hire one person, right, to make those calls for you. And all they're going to do is they're going to call their customers and they're going to say, hey, it's Jenny calling from Pilot Mortgage. Listen, we want to do a better job staying in touch this year. Damon's actually in the office today or Tyler's in the office today. You worked with them in the past. But he's on the other call and he just wanted me to check in. Is there anything I could do in terms of helping you with mortgage finance? Customer's going to say one of two things. They're going to say, number one, oh my God, your timing's impeccable. Yeah, I was talking to my sister last night. She's looking for a house. Maybe you can schedule a call with Tyler and we can talk about it. Yeah. Or they're going to say, you know what? Actually, I appreciate the phone call. Thank you for checking in. Right, great. And at which point your director of WOW, this person making those calls, is going to say, while I have you, can I just make sure you're up to date? Right? Are you still at the same address? How do you want to be communicated going forward? Would you like us to contact you via SMS, via outbound telephone calls, via email, right? And you're just purifying and cleaning up your database. I know you will tell me firsthand that one outbound caller probably generated $25, $30, $40 million per year of new business. You're just getting people, right? You're staying in touch, you're engaging them in your database, but you're getting them at a period where you've now made yourself top of mind again.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that, constant outbound communications that, most brokers don't do as frequently as they should.
I think it's one of the things that a lot of people, when they talk about what they do for their clients and the value that they actually bring to their clients, talk about, but they don't actually deliver it. Right. And actually delivering it is really what creates that loyalty, the brand loyalty, and helps you grow. Because again, you're going to not only be able to assist that person, and you're really serving your clients at the end of the day. It's not about serving yourself, or we get more business out of it. But if you actually call your people and the intention is to serve them, it does multiply itself. And
yeah, man, if you can get yourself to the position where your client says, I'm calling like my guy, Tyler, the mortgage guy. He's my guy. I know he's got my back, right? And the only reason, or the only way you can get there, rather, is if you are making outbound, regular, proactive phone calls. If you're sending them items of value, if you're keeping them educated, if you're sending them a newsletter, if you're sending them a birthday card, if you're, sending them a recipe around Thanksgiving, you're just saying, I care. I'm going the extra mile. It isn't transactional. I'm staying in touch. Because, when you stay in touch with people, you have a deeper relationship. When you have a deeper relationship, they're referring more often.
That's right.
When they refer more often, business and life gets easier.
Yeah, we still do those annual mortgage review calls with all of our clients. We do them as video calls now, which is awesome because you actually get to see people face to face. And just today, I had a conversation with a lady. She's a nurse. Get to hear about how she's feeling about her mortgage, her life, potentially going on strike in the future, ask her what her plans are for the rest of the year, et cetera. And the relationship I have with that client now is incredible. grow and our ability to be able
They
to
become
continue
friends.
business. Yeah. And it actually means something though, as a human being. It's more fulfilling as a professional to have relationships with your clients and the people that you work with, so that at the end of the day, it does excite you to get up and continue to grow it.
The other secret I'll tell you that works really well is, Zoom changed everyone's world,
Yeah.
right? Everyone knows how to click on a Zoom link now. And, you can use it for just day-to-day activity. Like if I'm working with mortgage customers today, I'd much rather send them a Zoom, because if there's a husband and a wife and they're sitting side by side and I see them on a Zoom call, I can read the body language. I can see when they're engaged, not engaged. I can see when, maybe, one of the spouses just kind of reacts different, or the body contorts because they don't understand or they don't agree with maybe what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Number one. But number two, it gives you a real good opportunity for them to see you and understand your body language and really learn your sincerity. And, it just gives you a huge advantage that making an audio call just doesn't provide.
No.
So I say to people, man, if you can't get in front of them, which is fine, right? I'm totally fine with doing mortgage transactions front to back. We do it with hundreds of thousands of, transactions, each year. But getting, in front of them via Zoom or a video conference call is way more powerful than just a regular audio call.
I think when we look at home ownership in Canada today, one of the biggest concerns amongst the younger generations is that they'll never be able to afford a home. They're told all the time that I'll never be able to afford a home. It's in the media. How would you advise mortgage brokers to go about educating Canadians that it is still possible? And what would your message to Canadians be about owning a home moving forward and the possibility of that becoming a reality?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we've, reached a level where there's a whole generation coming up and thinking that home ownership isn't, in their future. The fact of the matter is, with, the rates today, although they seem, a little bit higher coming off historically once in a lifetime rates, through COVID, are very manageable. And I think that we as mortgage professionals have to make sure that we shout up from the rooftops to all Canadians that none of us started with a home in Vancouver proper.
Right.
I started with a home in Maple Ridge.
Yeah.
And then I went to Port Coquitlam, and then I went to Port Moody, and then I went to Anmore. The key to the young consumer now is just to get started, right? Number one, even if you start off with a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, it's forced savings.
Yeah. Any
of your equity that you're building, right, is tax-free equity. There isn't, a better use of your money as a, young 20-something today. Probably more importantly is there's pride of ownership. It's the place where you're going to raise your children. It's the place where you're going to create memories. It's the place where you're going to have many new life experiences. So I would be on high alert to stand on guard of your brain, to not let those naysayers and all that negativity in. It's not, out of reach. We put thousands of young Canadians in new homes every single year in Canada. And I think that you should be talking to a accredited, proper, licensed mortgage professional, like someone at Dominion Lending Centers, Mortgage Center Canada, Pilot Mortgages, right? Yeah. And help them educate you. You may have to plan for it. You may have to save for, the next couple of years. But I think it's really important that we continue to spread the message that owning a home is a good investment. And it's been a good investment in Canada for hundreds of years.
Love it. What was your biggest mistake that you've made in business, and what have you learned from it?
I think the biggest mistake that I've made in business is trying to build something that's perfect, letting me sort of hesitate or not start or put something off because I wanted it to be perfect. I've realized today that getting started is more important than making something perfect, because you're learning every step of the way. There's an old saying, right? You don't have to build the perfect race car. You just got to get 4 wheels in the car and get it on the road.
Right. And
with every lap, you're going to get better. You're going to get faster. And I think that's a real metaphor for life. The imposter syndrome is real. People thinking I'm not good enough, I'm not educated enough, I didn't have the upbringing, I didn't have the background, holds a lot of people back. Yeah. And I think that there's so much available to us in terms of education and the ability to learn now online and even greater now with AI, I think that anything is possible. And I think that your past doesn't equal your future. And I think that if you want to get into our industry or any industry for that matter, reach out, have conversations, do the homework, find a mentor, and just start. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think that every forward step gets you one step closer to where you want to go. You know, a lot of people were raised in a household where, and I was one of them, where their parents just, you know, education, higher education just wasn't, you know, it wasn't talked about in our house.
Yeah.
Nobody in my family went to post-secondary education.
No.
Nobody in my family started businesses. And I think that anything's possible today. I think that, you know, many people talk about our generation and they think that we're disadvantaged and it's harder than ever. I don't agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree. I think that there's more opportunity, faster accelerated learning than ever before. I just think that the demon that you have to battle is, you know, the one between your two ears.
Yeah.
And I think get started, you know, making forward progress, get you to your destination much quicker.
It's an incredible message. I love it. Last question for you, Gary. You've built an incredible legacy, incredible company. If everything was removed tomorrow and you had 60 seconds to leave a message for your family, your friends, and your colleagues, what would you want to leave them with?
You know, I'm not really a legacy guy. You know, I just want people to say that he said what he did what he said, that he was genuine, he was authentic. And most importantly, I want my kids to say, my dad was a cool dad. My dad was a good dad. That's all I care about. You know, listen, this is a journey. I'm in charge of a big organization in the mortgage finance, you know, world in Canada right now. I can be replaced. You know, we're not saving dying children. We're writing mortgage loans.
Right.
I think, you know, just to be humble and to be appreciative and grateful for the good fortunes that we have and have had. I feel like a pretty lucky guy. Just continue on the path that we're doing, do good work, be proud of the imprints that we're making along the way, and don't sweat it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, that was awesome.